Serious, what's the creepiest / scariest thing you've ever experienced in your life? When I was in college, I got a research grant to do a comparison between tourism and ancient religious sites. I chose to focus on portals to the underworld in Greece and Belize. While in Belize, I became friends with a bartender who happened to have a sister who ran the books for travel company. The sister hooked me up with an amazing trip to a cave that just been opened. I went with 2 other guys who were training to be guides for the cave and the main guide who also brought his wife and kid. Prior to us arriving, only researchers have been allowed in. I was able to witness a Mayan purification ceremony before entering the cave. Inside I was able to see lots of ancient pots with chocolate dust in them, volcanic bloodletting knives and collection plates, and got to handle a stalagmite sacrificial club. We came to a carved stalagmite and our guide told us about the Maya priests putting a torch at the base and the shadow that was cast would look like a jaguar. Our guide sat us down in front of it and pulled out a lighter. We turned off our headlamps and he lit his lighter at the base and held it there. The only light was coming from this silly little red lighter, but in the incredibly deep darkness of the cave, it cast a magnificent shadow that looked exactly like a silhouetted jaguar's head. As myself and the other guides watched in shock, the shadow on the wall opened and closed its mouth and started to turn its face towards us. As one, we all lit our headlamps and noped out of that room. Bonus, after exiting the cave, I noticed that every single one of my photos after I handled the club had orbs in them. Anywhere from a single orb to about 10 would be crowded around me in my photos. I just assumed that I got water in my camera and that they were water spots. Then I looked over and saw one of my other guides' camera screen. Every single one of their photos of me, or with me in the background, had orbs in it, but not other photos. I was sitting on the balcony around 2 or 3 AM smoking. I have a lot of flowers in pots. Some are hung, some are on the ground. I also have lights and you can see pretty clear. All of a sudden one of the flowers just started shaking, as if wind was blowing it. But there was no wind and all the other flowers stood still. I kept my eye on it and around it thinking it was a bee or some kind of bug, but I didn't see or hear anything. Plus it was shaking in a way that human hands would shake it left-right. When I used to move furniture, I went to a 2-story house that had been in a fire. The fire didn't do too much damage to the house, but the owner did not stay there. The owner was an old man and must have had a lot of pets because there were leases and little bells that are on cat collars everywhere in the house. During my breaks my co-worker, he's Hispanic and we will call him Bob, and I would mess around since there was no one around beside us. There was a piano that was in the middle of the living room that we would mess around with, and every time we played around with it, the piano would consistently play 2 notes. At first I thought it was rats or something cause there was a shit ton of their droppings everywhere, but it was always the 2 same notes. Then other weird stuff started to happen, like loud noises in the house, but the house would be completely empty besides Bob and me. I had doors slam in front of my face, and no, it was not windy, or was a window open. I also had those bells that was littered everywhere get thrown at me while I was the only person in the room. There was a wooden board that was propping up the garage door motor at an angle, and that board went the opposite way and almost hit Bob in the head while we were moving boxes in the garage. More shit happened, but that is the gist of it. I never believed in ghosts or the supernatural, cause I'm a science bitch, but after experiencing things that I couldn't rationally explain helped me change my mind. Posted before, but here goes again. Having a large metal ladder thrown at me when I was alone. Full story below. A few years ago, before I moved out of my parents' house, I was living with them at a new house. I moved in a few weeks after they had set it all up. Decorated etc. First it started with footsteps, sounds etc, and obviously my first though for carbon monoxide, but we had the place tested and it was clean. I hadn't actually witnessed anything. I couldn't explain at this point and didn't completely believe it all. Footsteps, doors closing could be just my mind playing tricks. My stepdad had said he saw a face in a dark room when he was painting the door frame and the door slammed in his face. Note, when we moved in the door was bolted from the outside with no door handle inside, which is creepy enough. So now my experience, we use the room of doom for storage as I'll call it, and I was putting some washing in there after work and was completely alone in the house except for the cat, who was laying in the hall outside the room against the far wall. About 2 meters away is a heavy metal ladder used for the attic, so I turn to leave, and as I do the cat looks at me and arches her back and hisses towards the room I'm in. I hear a scraping noise behind me. The floor was wooden and hadn't been carpeted in that room yet, and I turned to see the ladder standing upright, and then after a second it tipped towards me. I jumped back and the ladder landed against the door and jammed it shut, trapping me outside. I managed to get my arm through eventually and move the ladder, but it must have taken 30 minutes at least. No one in room afterwards. I still can't think of a logical explanation for a ladder leaning against the wall to go against its weight and then topple towards me. After that we closed that door and it seems to die down and only minimal things would happen, such as doors closing and opening during the night. I've moved out now, but my parents continue to report voices and other strange sounds as well as things moving, but nothing as aggressive as I encountered. We also tried to contact the previous owner, but she refused to talk to us for one reason or another, and we did manage to pass a message through people we know, and she said something along the lines of I don't talk about that house. I've posted this elsewhere. Now I'm one of those skeptic types. I don't believe in ghosts, UFOs, or Bigfoot. I need some hard evidence and I'll take the scientific method over a psychic any day. But one night makes me wonder. This was a few years back during the summer, before I left for college. It was one of those perfect summers. I was with a group of friends and we were extremely bored. So one friend brought up the idea to go ghost hunting. The top candidate was a place called SDYL Hill. Who doesn't love a good ghost story? So 5 of us hop in my old Chevy Cavalier and we go off into the Pennsylvania countryside. Along the way we are telling jokes and listening to music until we get there and start up the hill. Aside from a few farmhouses it's totally dark, so we go up the hill, quick turn at the top and slowly go down the dirt road. About halfway down I stop the car and see this creepy collection of wood. It was an old fence. This thing looked like something out of the Blair Witch, and I was transfixed on it and the dark around us. The darkness was suffocating. While looking at the fence I hear a how or a what from the backseat. All of a sudden my friends in the back start screaming bloody murder. What is that? Geo. Now, without looking I floored that Cavalier and got out of Dodge. As we leave the area I figure this was a prank on me, so I tell the gang to fess up. I look back and see the girl in the back crying her eyes out telling me it wasn't a joke. Well shit. These guys are going for the Oscar. So I ask what they saw. One friend claims they first saw a light moving at the hilltop. The other friend says it was moving towards a car. Then the crying friend screams that something white crawled out from under the car. It was moving like a spider. It was so fast. One friend chimes in. The crying girl screams it was a dress. It was wearing a dress. I hauled ass out there at this point, but to this day they swear it was there skittering after us. So time passes. I go to school. One weekend I'm back in town and run into an old friend who fancies himself a local historian. Ghost stories come up, so I bring up that night on the hill. Oh Spook Hill. Your friend saw her. My curiosity is obviously piqued, so I ask to know more. He says in the 1800s a woman was killed in a carriage accident on the hill, right around a fenced area. The wagon wheels took her head off, but the others in the carriage including her daughter survived. Legend has it that she searches the hill at night with a lantern trying to find her way home. With a smile he says you're lucky she didn't follow you home, young man. I still remember that part. I checked and the story goes back to at least the 70s. Here's a news clipping for some proof link. com/AAV36VQ. All these years later, I live 500 miles away, and thinking of it still scares me. Like I said, Reddit, I'm a skeptic, but I always wonder about that night on SDYL Hill and the lady in the lantern. So, I've had many creepy experiences, but this is the most recent one. 2 weeks ago, my mom and stepdad went away for a weekend trip, so I had the house to myself. Just me and my dog. It was a Saturday night, and I got home from work about 1 AM. I needed to let my dog out, so I grab a cigarette and head outside. I live out in the country, So my house is completely surrounded by the woods. It's completely pitch black outside my house. Even with our porch lights on, you cannot see shit in those trees. I have barely opened the door to my backyard, and I hear trees moving. For a second, I thought it was just the sprinklers going off, but after listening for a few more seconds, I can hear the trees moving in different places, as if something was making its way through the trees. It sounds massive, like grizzly bear sized, slowly making its way through the brush about 10 yards away from me. I also live in a bayou type area 20 minutes away from Galveston, Texas. What kind of ducking animal lives here that sounds like a goddamn baby elephant trudging through the woods? Thinking, hopefully, it was one of my neighbors. I yell out a helpless "who's there?" Nothing but branches snapping and trees limbs moving. I could not make out what the duck was making that sound. Frozen in fear, I just stand halfway out the door, listening to this monster walk around my backyard. My dog is looking at me confused, whilst glancing towards the direction of the noise nervously. I call him back, and I reluctantly go upstairs to another door that opens towards the backyard, frantically searching for the cause. A mountain lion, coyote, an alligator, ducking anything. But I saw nothing. I finish listening to this beast make its way to the side of my house. That's when I slam the door and proceed to lock all of the doors in the house. If anyone has any knowledge of the Bay Area of Texas that can tell me what the hell I heard, that would be great. This happened back when I was around 15 or so. I'm 34 now, so this was way before the clown craze. At the time where riding around with my older friends and underage drinking was so very cool. I mean, I was hardcore with my strawberry daiquiri. Thank you very much. Yes. We always had a designated driver. We were on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. It was just the road we always took to get away from town. Every weekend we would ride out there, until one night, there was this giant dude, just standing right on the side of the road, wearing overalls, no shirt, and a clown mask, holding what looked like an axe the size of the car. My friend that was driving slammed on the brakes. We all just sat there staring at him as he stared at us. He never moved. Fear finally got the best of us, and we hauled ass out of there and never went back. I will never forget that. I could post stories about living in an alleged haunted house, but one thing that really sticks out were these recurring nightmares that I had as a kid. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about them 20 plus years later. One was of this dog/wolf with fiery red eyes. I could tell when it was about to show up in my dreams. It usually happened when I'd enter a room and everyone disappeared. Then it would stare me down. Once it was sitting on a bed. Another time it was at the back of our old barn. And another time it was at the bottom of a staircase. I would turn to run and make about 3 steps before it pinned me to the floor. It would threaten me with this dry voice that sounded like burning leaves. The last time I dreamed about it, I was probably 5 at the time. I remember that it said, "You think you can get rid of me that easily? You can't. I'll always find you." We had just moved from our allegedly haunted house in the country to one in town. It got to the point where I'd beg and plead my parents to let me stay up. I remember that I cried when my dad wished me sweet dreams before going to bed. Another recurring one was of a lady in white that would stare up to my second floor bedroom window. I always had this dream when it was storming and around the same age as when I'd get the nightmares about the dog. This one was more like a camera's perspective. I knew that I was in bed sleeping, but it was like watching a camera pan over our farmhouse during a torrential rain. Lightning flashes, thunderclaps, and there she is standing in our gravel driveway. She's wearing a lacy white dress, but it's stained with mud from the raindrops hitting the gravel. Her skin is paper white. I can't see her face though, but she's staring up at my window. Right before I wake up, there would be a voice drumming the same line over and over about her being a witch. It seemed like a warning, but it was just like, look out for the witch. She's a witch. A witch. 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 Like, I know it's a stupid dream, but there are some times where I wonder if my 1.5-year-old daughter has similar dreams. She sometimes wakes up screaming, and I need to go talk to her to calm her down. I just hope that when she's older, that she can talk to me if she has those kind of dreams instead of internalizing them like I did. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.